Hey guys, I'm Dr. Bob, and in this video we're gonna put together a nice outside environment to have Psyduck play its little game in. Now as we get started on this, there's two bits of housekeeping that I want to do as we continue with this tutorial series. So the first one is, let's get rid of the tutorial info for the URP. So what you can do is you can click on README here and then just click on Remove README Assets, and that will take care of all of those. And we don't have to worry about them anymore, and it's just some housekeeping. Okay, so with that in mind, another thing I want to do in terms of housekeeping is make sure that you have a backup. So if you open up your Unity Hub, click on the three dots, Show and Explore, and you'll see your game in Explorer. And I've already done this, but what I want you to do is right-click it and make sure you send it to an archive or send it to a compressed zip folder. It doesn't really matter what, but that you just keep one copy every time you go in between different videos that has a backup of your project, just in case for some reason your project gets corrupted. I also have this in a Dropbox folder that will synchronize everything for me and retain multiple versions. You could use other forms of versioning or version control, but this is a very quick and easy way to make sure that you never lose anything. Just keep in mind though, at some point if you're going to make multiple copies like that, you probably want to delete them because I'm already at about half a gigabyte and it's going to get bigger than that. All right. Okay, so mostly up until this point, we have just been downloading free assets off the internet and use those in our project, and well, those are the ones that we can see down here. But for this part of the tutorial series, we're gonna go to the asset store. And the Unity Asset Store will actually open up in a web browser, and we're gonna look for a free nature pack that will work in our URP project. So the one that I would like to use is this one here, by Polytope Studio. Let's click on that. And you can check the license agreement in case you ever want to use these kinds of assets for a commercial project, but it will serve our purposes fine for this class. So this is a pack with a lot of different things in it, and you can make beautiful scenes like these with it. So that's what we're going to be doing. So the first thing that you want to do is add it to your Unity assets, and I've already done that, but I'm going to delete them for a second. Or actually, I'm not sure how to do that once you've added the assets to your Unity assets, but you should see a button that says Add to Assets. So you can click on that button, and then you can click on Open in Unity. It will prompt you to open the Unity editor, like so. And the package manager should pop right up. Now, if the package manager is not popping up, you can just click on Windows, Package Managers, and you'll see it right there. You might see in project for what you're doing, or you might see built-in, or you might see Unity registry. What you want is My Assets, and that's where you should be able to find this. Now, if you haven't ever played around with this before, like I clearly already have, there will be a download button here, so you can press the download button. For me, it's re-download, and it will download all the assets to your computer. Now, as this is going on, I'm going to point out what folder these assets are going into. So at the time of recording this video, you'll find them on your C drive under your username, App Data, Roaming, Unity, Asset Store 5.x, and Polytope Studio is filling up nicely here, and those are the assets. If you're no longer using these assets, you can just delete them here and get rid of them. A bunch of assets from Unity Store can be pretty big on your hard drive, and if you just keep downloading all these assets, you're going to end up with multiple gigabytes, and it will just pretty much eat up your hard drive. So this is how you can delete them again if you ever need to. In the meanwhile, we have downloaded everything, and now we're going to import into our project. So let's click on Import. And as you'll see here, there are a lot of things that it wants to import. Now, we are not going to need everything. Usually, the first time when I try out an asset from the asset store, whether it's for Unity or Unreal Engine or any other engine, I'm going to open it in a blank project because I don't want to import a bunch of things that I'm actually not going to be using much. So I've already done that for this specific asset, and I know that we don't need environment free. We can get rid of that. That's all just demo. We do want the low poly medieval environments. So from the prefabs, the sources, we want all of that. And then we also want the low poly medieval village assets. It's actually not an entire medieval village. It's just a couple of a couple of fences, and I think a little bridge of something. Like, yeah, as you can see here, it says bridge, it says fences. And you can preview these things actually by clicking on it if you want to have it take a look. Another thing, if you go to the sources, that's where everything is stored. I haven't really explained prefabs yet, but prefabs are your objects as you will use them in the game scene. And I'll close that down again. The sources are the meshes and are the materials and so forth. So you can see what you're exactly incorporating with your game project. So you have materials, here are all the meshes that you will be using, here are the shaders that come with the package, and then there's all the textures that come with the package. So you're gonna get a lot of things that are already hooked up the way they should be, and you don't have to worry about it like we did in the previous video. So anyways, we're not gonna use a environment free folder, but we are going to use everything else. So we can just click on import, and then we get a little importing interface. And I'm going to pause that here and immediately start where the importing is done. And voila, it took about 45 seconds to import everything. Now, how do we go from this asset pack to those beautiful images that you see here? That's what we're going to be doing in this video. So we can close all these windows. I don't think we will be needing them anytime soon. Yeah, the arrow with the disposed object is not super relevant right now. Don't click away errors whenever we're going to start writing code, obviously, but like this is just not super relevant. I'm gonna open up the folder here, and here you'll see everything that we brought in. Now, oops, the first thing that you probably want to notice is that if we're going to look at these, well, we don't have to look at the prefabs yet, but if we're going to check what we've downloaded and we look at the flowers, they look magenta. If you look at the mushroom, they look magenta. So you might remember from previous videos why that is. It's because the shader is not compatible with our URP rendering pipeline or universal rendering pipeline. So we need to update the shaders. Now, if you read the instructions on the asset store, they actually have provided this asset that will override the shaders so that it will function with URP. So you can just double click this and you'll get this interface. And then you'll have to click on import to actually import the script, I'm believing. And then you double click it again. And then you should see this. And you'll see that these are the same files that we've already downloaded. Except this time it's just shaders that are going to be overwritten. And I think there's even a little note here. Files will exist in the project already that will be overwritten. So that's actually what we want. So we can click on import, and this will override the shaders. Again, it'll take a couple of seconds. And now our shaders should support URP. So when we look at our meshes here now, with the flowers, still looking magenta. And if we click on it, it updates here, so that's good. And if you press Ctrl and S on, let me show the keyboard overlay. So Ctrl S to save. Sometimes it updates those things. Not doing it right now, which is fine. It should be working though. Well, let's just drag it into our scene. And yeah, so it seems to be working just fine when we're putting everything in the scene. So I'm assuming that the thumbnails just need a little bit of updating, but these are working just fine. So that's great. We've got everything sorted out. Let's check if these ones are working as well, because I had some issues with that. And these ones aren't working yet. So when I actually installed this, I noticed that the shader updates mostly just apply to the medieval environment, but not to the village. Thankfully, there's a solution for that as well. You can just grab the material here and then click on edit rendering, materials, convert selected built-in materials to URP. Proceed, and that will sort this one out. And now if we bring this in, it's working. Again, I'm not sure why these aren't updating yet, but as you can see, I pressed Ctrl S to save, and now it seems to be working. Did that do the trick in this folder as well? Not yet. Well, that's interesting. I'm quickly going to restart my project to see what happens. That really didn't make any difference, but I did notice that once I went into the materials folder, that these took a couple of seconds to update, so maybe these will also take a couple of seconds to update. It's a little peculiar, but I think we can just move on since everything is working up there, and I can add another node in case I can figure out what's going on with that. It does look like that in the prefab folder everything seems to be loading correctly, so it's just peculiar that they are stuck in the user interface, which I got a couple of warnings concerning that as well, so that's something I'll look into, but I don't think it's super important right now. So we'll just move on, and as you can see, there's some lovely assets here. One of the cool things about these assets is that they all have levels of detail set up, so LODs, which is something that you can do through your 3D modeling software. Your artist will provide you with these. And as you can see, if we bring in, let's say we bring in this fruit tree. So I'm just going to press F so it fits into my view. You can click on it, and you can then move this around to inspect the LODs. So the idea of an LOD is to conserve your system resources. The further the camera is away from an object, the lower the quality of the mesh that's going to be used. And you can even do it to the point that at the last LOD, before you actually cull it, you can even just put a billboard, which is just a 2D sprite. But these are all still meshes, but the difference between the meshes is quite substantial. At LOD 0, which is up close, as we are seeing here, we have a mesh with 972 triangles. At LOD 1, we got about 800, so 172 gone. And then at LOD 2, we are only having 511 left. So that's how this is set up. So that's pretty cool, a way to conserve some system resources. And also keep in mind that LOD 0 is actually the one that's up close, and LOD 2 is the one that's furthest away. So really cool feature to make sure that your game can run on lower end machines as well. All right, let's get rid of this tree now. So just delete it, and then we are ready to start building our actual terrain. So to build a terrain, we're going to click on plus, and we should be able to find 3D object, terrain. And there's multiple ways to do a terrain in. I'm going to press F to, here we go. This is a big plane really that we're going to use for our terrain, but there's multiple ways to set up your level really in Unity. One of the ways that you could do it for an organic map, such as the one here, we're going to have a nature scene, is using this terrain feature. But if you want something that's more of an interior architectural style, there's ProBuilder, for which I'll provide a YouTube video separately in the course documentation. And you know, there's many other options as well. You could even just get a mesh, a really big mesh from Blender or any 3D rendering or 3D modeling software, and just import that into Unity and use that instead. So anyways, in this video we are going to make an outdoors terrain, so it's going to be organic. And the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to make a couple of adjustments to it. So the first is we're going to make sure that our terrain isn't this big anymore. I'd rather have it a little bit smaller. How about 250 by 250? Now you might be like, wow, that's really small, but it really isn't. That's still a big space. That's 250 by 250 meters. So, you know, that can fit a lot of different things. Furthermore, if you want to make this bigger, you can use it as a tiling system and just start clicking around it to just add more 250 by 250 tiles. So I think one of these will suffice for now, but I'll mess around with it and we'll see. Also, it looks like I inadvertently messed with the name, so I'm just going to call this terrain again. I pressed F2 to change the name, but you can also just click with right mouse button and choose rename. And so this is actually a live mesh that you can edit. It's pretty much like a video game, honestly. It's pretty cool how Unity does this. So what we can do now is we can click on the second button, which will allow us to paint terrain. And what we want to do here is we want to set it up so that we can start putting color on this grass, actually an entire material, so that we can have something that will actually look like an outdoor scene. And to do that, we're going to edit our terrain layers. So we are going to start by creating a layer or adding a layer. I don't know what the difference would be right now. Oh, adding a layer is adding a pre-existing layer. So we are going to create a layer. And for the layer, we want to use a nice material. So let's see what we can find here. PT ground grass is probably a good one to start with. And now our entire scene is filled with this material. So let me see if I use the hand, it's a little bit easier to see. So I'll make this a little bigger for everyone. So if I go through this now, you can kind of see that there's like this grass texture everywhere. That looks good. Like from above, it doesn't look that great because you can clearly see that it's a texture that's repeating itself. From up close, it's a little bit easier to see. Now, what I like to do when I start working on a game like this is to put a character in there just for scale, because 250 meters by 250 meters, that's quite a bit. So what we are going to do is we're going to close this again, and we're going to go to our characters, which are in the source folder. And in here, we should find our meshes. And are we going to use Psyduck or are we going to use a trainer? I think having the trainer is probably, or you know what, how about we use Psyduck and just drop Psyduck straight in here. Now Psyduck is enormous. That's because he was enormous when he was in Blender already. All right, so this is getting a little bit awkward because if you followed along with my previous video, you should have a regularly sized Psyduck, because in that video, we actually applied the transforms properly before we exported Psyduck to use into Mixamo and Unity. However, I was getting a little bit weird with time here and I didn't record them as chronologically as I probably should have. So in this video, there was no Bob actually putting those export settings correctly, and I ended up with an enormous Psyduck in Unity. So if you're seeing this issue, you need to check out the previous video because the solution for the scaling issue is in there. And I guess I'm just gonna have to rewind back time or something and make sure that everything works for the continuation of the video. Let's take care of that and let's continue. All right, so with that, we have a Psyduck in our map, and you can kind of get some idea of what the scale is, because that's the entire point. We'll bring in Trevor or Trainer at some other time, but right now it just gives us some idea how vast this map is and why I don't necessarily want a bigger map. I mean, that's plenty of space to play our little Psyduck catching game in. All right, so let's look at how we can actually model this terrain a little bit and give it a couple of hills and so on. So to do that, we can click on the terrain again, and then we get our terrain options here. I'm going to press the F button to zoom out a little bit, but boy, this is really large. Maybe I'm going to click here again, and well, actually, let's not mess too much with it right now, because I already moved it to the middle of my Cartesian axis system. But yeah, we're going to start working the height of the terrain a little bit now and see what we can accomplish with that. So to do that, you want to click on the second button, and we already saw the paint texture thing there that we used to create this terrain layer, but we can also do raise or lower terrain, which is pretty cool. And to do that, we can select different kinds of brushes. Now, if you want, you can go into the asset store under, actually go to your package manager, not the asset store, and then go to the Unity registry. And in the Unity registry, there's a bunch of different assets that you can get that are made by Unity. And we're going to grab terrain tools. So terrain tools, and again, we can click on install. And this is just a bunch of extra brushes and terrain tools that we can use to make it a little bit easier to modify this bit of land that we have in front of us. And once we are done, which took about 30 seconds on my system, we can click here again and so activate this inspector. And as we can see now, there are more options here, which is great because now we have more sculpting objects, we have some effects, we can even apply erosion and things like that. And that's just neat to have. You can also add more brushes if you like. These are basically just alpha masks that you can make in any image editor that you like, but I'm not going to go that far. But if you want them, you can go online and you can find more. I think even in the package manager, you can download asset samples from the asset store for terrain tools, which will give you a whole bunch of extra brushes and so forth. But I don't want to load all of that into this project. So with this brush selected, then we can now raise or lower the terrain. And as you can read here, it's very straightforward. You can just click to raise your terrain. Wait, let's see. Click to raise. Okay, I'm not. Oh, Jeez. I'm not seeing anything because of the camera angle, but as you can see here, we are raising the terrain quite a bit, and we are getting these nice uneven patterns because we had that brush earlier. But I'm going to Control Z a couple of times just to get rid of that again, and then select a brush that's a little bit more irregular, like this kind of pattern, just to raise. And we're gonna paint a couple of hills like that. Now, what you can do is you can use A, S, and D to mess around with this. So if you press A and hold it down, actually, let me turn on the keyboard overlay for that. So if you press A and you hold it down, and you click and you press A, you can modify the strength, right? Control Z that again. If you press S, you can modify the scale. If you press D, you can rotate, which can be useful from time to time as well. So this is a neat way of, because it'll go really, really hard if you if you're not careful with it. So I'm gonna put my strength a bit lower, like this, but I am gonna increase my brush size a bit, and I'm just gonna paint these little hills. And yeah, as you will see, we're already losing our Psyduck here, but that's fine. Just little clicks. But what I kind of want to get like this neat little valley so that it makes sense what the space is that we will play our game in. And yeah, I think this looks nice enough. And now I'm gonna set my brush strength to pretty low, almost non-existent. And then a really big brush size, like that. And just a couple of clicks in the middle, just to make the landscape less even. But yeah, so now we are seeing something like this. Now, if you're wondering, well, where did Psyduck go? Well, Psyduck has been pushed underneath the mesh, so we can select Psyduck again, and then we should be able to find Psyduck if we go look here. Is that Psyduck? Oh gosh, he's so tiny. They are so tiny. So press this button, bring Psyduck back up. And yeah, so now you want to put Psyduck somewhere, and you can check the shadow to see how close you are. Once we're actually going to start coding this game, it's, you know, we can mess around with that a little bit. But if you press F, it's easy to bring him in. And usually what you'll do is just have him spawn, and we'll see how that goes on an uneven landscape like this. I'm sure it'll work out well enough. But yeah, so this is where Psyduck is standing with his full, what is it, 80 centimeters? Lovely. So time to add some foliage then. So let's click on the terrain again, and now we can go back actually to the second button for the paint texture, and we can click on paint texture again. I'm not entirely sure why Unity decides to just throw up these errors that don't really seem to do anything. Anyways, so, oh, okay. There's something weird going on here. Let's fix that. All right, so I just opened and closed some of these things. And yeah, so we can go back to our layers. Actually, this layer, oh shoot, am I? Okay, no. This layer actually brings us to that specific space in my file system. So I'm gonna call this layer, well, I'm not gonna name everything that's in here, but this is an actual ground layer. So I'm just gonna call this GL grass. There we go. So now the thing has a name, and it's part of this thing. So let's just go to create folder, and let's call this custom so that we know that these are things that are failed to write file. That's just peculiar. I wonder if something's going wrong with my hard drive, but as long as everything keeps working, it keeps working. So anyways, we were at the trees, I believe, in the prefabs, and that's where I left it. So I'm gonna move it into custom. All right, and here we got a ground layer grass. Now we can create more of those if we want. They are under, oh, it's been a while. Where did I last see those? Yeah, terrain layer. So you can just make your own terrain layer this way if you want. Well, let's call them TL maybe instead of GL then. And this one's going to be sand. And So this one's TL grass and this one's TL sand. And as you click on this, you'll see that they come with a diffuse map, a normal map, and a mask map if you want some empty spots in there. And you can even set specular or metallic. So we can do that here as well. And for our texture, we are going to, I'm going to have to find, can I click select? Yeah, I can click select. And then sand, but I think it's already right here. So yeah, it's called generic, but we'll call it sand for this. So now we made our own in a different way. And yeah, I don't think, there's no normal map or anything provided, and I don't think this level really needs it. So sand will be fine, and we can go back to our terrain, to the paint texture. And here, instead of create layer, we can now add layer, and we're going to add the layer for sand. And now we have 2 of them. And as we are painting, so let me zoom out a little bit again, because this is, here we go. So as we are going to paint this level, we can select here what we are going to be painting with. So if we click on the sand, we are now painting with sand. If we click, well, you wouldn't be able to see it, but if I click on the grass, I can override it again. And by doing that, we can do a lot of fun things. As for instance, we can go up here, maybe set something that's a little bit more dense. Maybe have the size a little bit smaller or a lot smaller. And then just start drawing a little path that we could have our character walk on in a circular area or something. That's actually still pretty small. I'm gonna just draw something like here. And you'll see that it follows the mesh pretty neatly. And yeah, if we go in here, like it's looking a lot nicer. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it looks a lot nicer. We'll add grass and other stuff to make it look really good in a bit. But yeah, so that's how you can start with a base texture, and you can draw on it, and you can define a lot more different types of layers, maybe some rock or something else, to really have a nice ground texture and kind of map out where you want certain things to be in your game. Okay, so with that, I think we're ready to start adding some trees now. So we go to the third button, which is called, I don't know why my mouse covers it, but it's called Paint Trees. And you can use this for all sorts of meshes that you want to scatter around. So pretty much what it comes down to, the first one is to change the terrain. The second one is to paint texture or to transform the terrain. The third one is to paint meshes over your terrain. And the final, or the fourth one that you have here, not the final one, but the fourth one is to put little billboards, little textures around everywhere, just put little details up. And then finally, the last one is just all sorts of settings that you can set regarding your terrain. But that's stuff for if you want higher detail in this kind of tutorial. So for now, what we want to do is let's start by adding some trees. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint trees. So we want to click on edit trees and we want to add a tree. So this thing just popped up. So now we want to assign a tree. So what we can do is we can go to the prefabs and we can grab a tree. Like, how about this tree? This looks like a nice tree. So drop that in here. Yep. And then we add, and now there is a tree in here. So zooming out again, so well, one thing we can do, which is probably not too surprising, is if we click, we just drop entire forests now, which is great. Because by doing that, one thing that we could do is, and again, you have your brush size here, except the brush doesn't really have the cool texture thingy, but to mess with that, what you can do is you can reduce the density and then there will be less trees. But I kind of want to, yeah, like density like this with a smaller brush size, so we can just put some trees along the edges, maybe a little bit bigger. You can make them taller, smaller. You can also randomize it by clicking this button, which is already on. Random rotation will make sure that the trees will rotate randomly. You can even mess with the color, but what we're going to do now is we're going to just put some trees along the edges. I feel like this is still, so the level of detail should take care of this, but you don't want to put a huge amount of trees there either. Now, what I've done in other games is just to accommodate the edges of the map and make it look good is to, I mean, you can put up an invisible wall, but sometimes what we do is just make sure we put some billboards there, so some sprites along that look like trees from a distance, but that actually take up very little memory. All right, so if we're looking to our map right now, this is kind of neat. Everywhere we're looking, there's just freaking trees. Yay, trees. Which isn't too bad. You know, and so now let's add a couple of trees to the actual play area of the map, which we kind of... And as you can see, as we zoom in and out, shadows go away just because we set those level of detail thingies. So yeah, let's add some more different types of trees. Actually, I just paused the video for a second and I just added all of these so you don't have to wait for me doing all that stuff. So now we can add trees, but we can also add shrubberies, or we can add rocks, or we can even add flowers. And let's have a look at how we can make our map look a lot better. Now, you already know how to do it with the brush, but you can also use the Mask Place Trees tool. So let's click on the tree and actually, let's zoom a little bit on Psyduck and click on Mask Place Trees, and that will open up this interface. And then you can add a heck of a lot of trees really quickly. Let's say I want 10,000 trees in here. We can just click on Place. And now Psyduck is in an actual forest, which is kind of cool. Yeah. So, and actually, the Mask Place Tree doesn't just take whatever you have selected. It will take everything. So now there's random shrubberies in there, there's the flowers in there, there's the rocks in there. So we have a level design, and it was pretty quickly, but it is going to be a little bit difficult to navigate this because you'll just get lost. And there are just too many trees. I think this is good for gameplay, but maybe not great. So what I want to do now is I want to reduce the forest a little bit and maybe have some more grass as well in certain areas, because I feel like the grass is a little bit low. And yeah, maybe clean out the pathway. So the cool thing is, like, if we want to clean this pathway, all you have to do is set your brush size. Like, how about like this? And now you can just, what is it again? It's hold shift and click to erase trees. So just keep shift down and click, and you can just go in and just remove wherever you want them to be removed. So with all that information, I think you kind of know how this works. And we can, you know, take a second to clean up the level so that it looks the way you want it to look gameplay wise. Now, the mechanic that we're going to have is something where Psyduck is going to run out into tall grass in between shrubbery and disappear whenever we try to catch him. So it's going to be a mechanic where there needs to be spots of tall grass where Psyduck can disappear and run away from us. So that's one thing that we want to try to accommodate. So just draw your level any way that you like. For me, it's going to look like this. And there we are. This is what I did with it. So you can, you know, you can put in as many foliage or nature elements as you like. Just be mindful of what your computer can actually pull off. But as you can see, mine has no problem running this whatsoever with a lot of it on it. But then again, I have a pretty good graphics card in this. So what we're going to do is, well, first let me show you what it looks like for me right now. So I took away a bunch of trees on the outside rim, which we don't really need. And I cleaned up this path entirely so that it's an easy path that we can walk down. So whenever, you know, like if we are going to run in here trying to catch ourselves a Psyduck, as we're looking around, we will always see where the path kind of is. And maybe at some point we want to put some landmarks or some stuff on there, or maybe some fenced areas or something. We'll see. But for now, I think this is fine. We'll figure it out once the gameplay's coming together on what we actually want to do with all these trees. But this looks like a pretty beautiful map. Like if we go back to Psyduck, I mean, look at that. The only thing I don't really like is the Skybox right now. And I haven't really talked much about the Skybox yet. So I'll provide an extra video that explains Skybox in quite a bit of detail, but in general, a Skybox is either a sphere or a cube map that goes around your level, and that is what Unity provided us with from the very beginning. It's what you literally see on the horizon, and from anywhere in your game, you want to put up enough foliage and maybe some elements that will block the player's path naturally, but it looks all right. The only thing is that this is a very simple Skybox. It's a procedural one. It does have a sun, and you can manipulate it actually by rotating the directional light. So the directional light, there's multiple types of lights in Unity. We don't go into too much detail of that, but a directional light is literally the light as if it was cast from the sun from an infinitely wide distance or far away distance onto your map. So it will light everything. And what we can do with that is we can even rotate it. So if we were to rotate this over the x-axis, if we put this at 90 degrees, I think, yeah, it'll be straight above our level. So this would be noon. If we put it at 180 degrees, you'll see it gets dark. But I mean, it doesn't really look good because this map hasn't, the shaders for this map don't look great for that. But yeah, it is what it is. If you put it at 270, you have night, and well, you want to work on your shaders a little bit so they don't look that weird. But this is not a game that's going to take place at night, so we don't really care about that. At 50, it looks pretty neat, but this pack also came with a Skybox. So to change out your Skybox, all you have to do is you go to your lighting settings. Let me see, where were those again? It's under Window, Rendering, and then Lighting. And that opens up on a second monitor for me. And here you have the lighting settings, which we are really not going to go into detail in right now. That's maybe for a later video. But for the environment, we can set up our Skybox. And we can use a default Skybox, which will not actually be in your project, because that's the Skybox that comes with the Unity editor itself. But you can double click there and then see if there is another Skybox. And there is, that's provided with the assets that we downloaded. So we have this one here, so let's double click on that. And then we can pretty much close it. Yeah. And what we see now is this is a much nicer Skybox. The lighting is also very different from this one. So this looks a lot more cartoony. Where's Psyduck? Let's see if it looks better with Psyduck as well. A little bluish, but I don't mind too much. I think this looks fine. And where is that Skybox exactly? Because I kind of wanted to show you what that looks like. Well, Skyboxes are materials, so you'll find it under Sources Materials for the assets that we import, and it's right here. And as you can see, a Skybox, in this case it's a cube map, and it comes with settings. You can put an HDR image on it when it's a cube map. You can mess with the exposure, make it brighter, make it less bright. I think a value of 1 looked absolutely fine. You can rotate the thing. You can mess with the tint color. Like right now, it's a little grayed out, I guess. If you bring it up, it's going to be wider. You know, just some mild effects to make the game look which way that you like. I mean, I think something like this looks neat. I kind of want Psyduck to still look kind of yellowish. So yeah, you can even do double-sided global illumination, so it's like coming from both sides, but I don't think that's really needed for this one. So that's the Skybox. Like I said, in the further reading, I'll put some videos that other people have made that will go into further detail on your Skybox. But I think with that, we have most of the stuff that we wanted to look into for this tutorial covered. Don't feel too bad about that because that was a long video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.